Is it recording?
It is recording, sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So this is our group 1 presentation with Adam, Brittany, Brandon, Rachel, and Abby. And this is ours about receipts and disbursements using your state coding system. So the contents, it's pretty straightforward. So basic information, and then we actually went in and dove into some of our school districts. And then there's kind of a conclusion at the end that talks about what we kind of got from all of it. And then, so the first part is the basic information about receipts and disbursements.
So
And
obviously,
I was going to say, if Adam wants to kind of talk about this a little bit.
yeah, so obviously there's two different types of classifications for money in schools. There is the receipts and there's the expenditures, or the revenues and the disbursements. And so school districts take in money, and that's how they get their revenue, this is an example of the revenue that Burwell collects. We have 3 counties that give us information, give us tax money. That would be Valley, Holt, and Garfield County. But this is what it looks like. This is what you get from the courthouse, what you're going to get with your real property taxes, the Homestead Act, all of that. You have the motor vehicle tax, licensing, but this is what you bring in. This is what our bookkeeper puts it into a separate spreadsheet, where first down, that first column is breaking it down to the fund that it's going into, the fund and the function. So that would be where you have the 01, the 08, the 09, talking about the general fund, the special building fund, and the QC puff. We put them into the 3 funds, the general fund, building fund, and the QC puff. If you had a bond, that would be your 4th fund that you would put that in, and that would be labeled an 07. So that's what the first 2 digits are. And then the next 4 digits, that is your function of where your bookkeeper is putting that money. Again, these are just over here highlighting the fund, the function. There's really not going to be an object with that, because you're not getting anything specifically. You're just putting them into those accounts and then going from there. And then this is another way to represent that same stuff on the revenue side. This is just 1 page of a yearly report that shows, again, you can see here the function, the fund and the function, and then what county they come from. So this has Holt, Valley, and Garfield all on one. And this is from, obviously 2 of them are from March, and then 1 of them is from April. But we have one of these that has every single month on it for a whole calendar year, so that you can see it. And the last pages are what you totally bring in. So revenues is the big way of us bringing in money.
That makes
And
me,
I think a lot of this stuff, oh, sorry.
that's okay, go ahead.
I think like the way this is done is, in talking to my mentors and my business manager, like this is done the same way in every district for those things coming in. So
I was just gonna say, it makes me curious if we do, I guess now I'm gonna ask my bookkeeper if we get funds from other districts. I'm assuming that's like, why are you getting them from other counties?
just because some of the districts, like our district, like we get funds from 5 different counties, just because and I don't know if this is like this everywhere, maybe it's a question to ask, but when someone builds a new house, they get to say what school district they're going to be in. So like we have some houses that are way closer to Kearney High School than they are Elm Creek, but they're actually part of Elm Creek's school district. And then we have some by Lexington that are in different counties, and some down towards Holdridge where they say this is our home district. So you get the taxes that they pay from those counties. So
I also think that some of it too is, so like Norfolk, they have the group homes, and a lot of the smaller districts around us don't have those. And so I think that's where some of the funding comes from, because if they have a student that goes to a group home, then they have to refer them to Norfolk.
I wouldn't have thought of that. Yeah, we also collect from 3 different counties. The majority of it is Sherman County, but just the way that the boundaries are, we take some from surrounding counties also. Because they're closer to Loop City than they would be to, I don't know, Litchfield or St. Paul or wherever it might be. And I know like when I was at Kearney's super close to the southern part of the county line. And so we'd get a lot of folks, Kearney's in Buffalo County, but just south of us is Kearney County. How confusing. And so we had a ton of students that would come from there. So we'd get Kearney County taxes to Kearney Public. Clear as mud, right?
What would be really interesting to know, and I think this is the way it is, but I'm not sure, is I think that for them to, if they build a house and they're gonna say that it's in your district, and this goes right in with our receipts, is it has to be touching, that county has to be touching your county's district. Like they can't jump a county
That makes sense.
to get it. I'm pretty sure, but that may be something that we ask later on as we go through some of this stuff, but it is interesting where they get those numbers and.
When I was teaching, we had a unique situation where we had a family that they sent their kids to our school and they were like right close to county line. And we actually traded with another county where we gave them some of our land and tax value. And we traded it to that other district. And then the people who brought their kids here, now where they live, their taxes then came to this school. And both boards had to agree to it. It had to be a very equal value to where you weren't losing valuation and all that. But it was a very unique, as a teacher when I was here going to the board meetings, it was a very unique process to go through.
Well,
And I
and
like,
yeah,
Go
that's what my next part was gonna, okay, so I build a house, but in 50 years I'm gone. So does whoever owns that property get to say like, no, I like to
No, it
switch
stays
that?
in the district it's in,
Hmm.
originally, it is originally in.
So
Hmm.
Rachel, I'd be curious with you, you're so close to the state line. How that's affected. I would assume you can't move across state lines, but I guess I don't know that.
No, we can't. In fact, we just, and even with like special education, we just had an early childhood kiddo. They're next to Burke. Their kids have gone to Burke, but for us to serve that student, we just have to go there and provide those services because they're across state lines. And so,
Crazy.
I thought it was interesting seeing 3 different reports with all the same information, one from the county, then one the bookkeeper does for her own, and then using this Software Unlimited, which I'm curious, do all of you guys use Software Unlimited for your
Yes.
bookkeeping tech, accounting stuff?
yes.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's even really other options.
There must be, because my bookkeeper said she used to use, not long ago, she used to use a different one and they switched to this 4 or 5 years ago when they they completely changed the coding system 4 or 5 years ago and they switched to this Software Unlimited.
Yep, that was the same here. There was a change in bookkeepers and then I think pretty much a lot of it had been by hand. And so they've moved to this Software Unlimited.
I also like seeing that, it's always the main part of it's property tax, and that's obviously what it is. But we do get funding other ways through those local agencies. So I think it's good to just know those. And, talking to my superintendent, when this money comes in, you and your bookkeeper, as superintendent, have already had talks. The bookkeeper just putting that money into those accounts to make sure it lines up with your budget.
Yeah.
So just a couple things, revenues. I think there's very local coding on the revenue side. I think it's pretty cut and dry of where that goes. Did you guys see that in your districts as you talked?
Yep.
Revenues go into 3 taxable funds, 4 if you have the bond. The bookkeeper distributes the money that goes into those various accounts. And you'll just need to be aware of the taxes that are coming in. As we talked in the first video, we're not getting 100% of the taxes every month. And you have certain months that are worth so much more just when people are paying their taxes and then coming in.
And I think with that, sorry, Adam.
No.
I think with that, it's really important when we're talking about those taxes coming in, those revenues coming in, that one of the really important things that we spent time looking on when I helped Tom with the budget this year is that land valuation and the increase in that land valuation, which is the taxable value that we get for our certain districts. So that's just when you get ready to do this or do with someone, That's a big number, that we really got to pay attention to.
Have your valuations stayed, have your counties been pretty good at like gradually increasing? Because what happened in Kippehaw County this year was, it was like a 15 to 17% increase. And we got all the little purple note cards at our house. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a 21% increase or a 22% on that piece. And I think that sometimes brings people out of the woodworks for those budget meetings too.
It went up a lot everywhere, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's also helps being aware, you know, in Garfield County, we had a lot of pasture land that now has been rezoned to residential because someone bought it up and then started putting lots on it or new campgrounds. So that greatly impacted our land valuation with just that ever changing, as with Calamus Lake and here where we're trying to grow our footprint of where people can live. Those things play huge factors in that you can't really forecast, but if you stay aware of what's going on, you know, it's going to help you prepare and plan.
That's kind of the same for here too, because the mayor, he did the same where they bought land on the outside of town, and then also Northeast has been expanding. And so they bought up a whole bunch of like this old farmland because they made like their big ag building, and now they have like a big vet tech building. And so I think that probably caused a lot of issues with property tax and stuff too.
Yeah. And I think this is the coding, like in talking to my mentors and just knowing, this is the coding as superintendents you really need to know, is this. A lot of the other coding for expenses and different things like that, they don't really get into the nuts and like they'll say, this is what we want to code it to, but like all of them said, I don't really know all the numbers to those. The business manager does, but these are the numbers that they really know because these are the numbers they use to build their budget and then monitor spending in it, in their line item budget.
It's a great point.
I can see that because I'm sure, I mean, my bookkeeper's given me this code after code after code. And when I talk to my superintendent, yeah, she's the one that's putting in all that stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
So after the revenues is the disbursements. So this is now what we are paying. And this is an example of what we give out at the board meetings for that line item budget of what everything's being spent. Obviously, the big difference here is now the codes are a lot bigger, where it is the fund, it's the function, it's the object, it's the building, where it's being broken down so much more, and a lot more local coding is starting to go into effect here. So you know, our last 6 digits here are all local coding of what building it's going into. Obviously, you know, general fund, and then the 2000s being support services, and then the 700s being property. That's where that's going, but then it's the building after that. And I really like this spreadsheet because of the percent of the budget that it shows, where you can see that you budgeted $2,000 for that top row, and you've spent a little over 1,300, and so you have a little bit of money. I think that's just imperative as you look at these on a month-by-month basis, that it helps keep you on track to not overspend. And that's where, you know, that little rainbow right there of just looking at what you did budget to what you actually did. And as you get the reports of these, of where the code's going and the percent of the budget, I think is just a huge thing there. And I think, again, as I said, I think this is where a lot of that local coding comes in on the disbursement side. And I know we have a discussion on that later, of just some examples, but I know at Burwell, we break it down pretty heavily, especially building specific, just so that you can have better tracking of where that money is going.
And the cool thing about that on these, you know, your last 3 numbers beyond it's really the last when you get to your building code and beyond. Like you can run, like we have some codes in our building for disbursements and stuff that are 6 numbers past that. But when we upload our budgets and stuff into the AFR, all those numbers go away. They don't go into the upload because that's the local level that we need to really track expenses, how we want to spend them. And that's what gives each district the flexibility to do that. And so every district kind of does it different. And that's the the beauty of it. So one of the things my mentor said on this is when you go into a new district, or if you go into a new district, like you got to kind of adapt to the way they've done things. You can change it a little bit, but if not, like it's going to take you a while to get that switched over to what makes sense for you, but you got to be able to adapt to that stuff as you do that with those numbers. So.
And what I like, because I am not a numbers person, and so this whole class is out of my wheelhouse totally. But what I love about that percent of budget, I feel like for people maybe are board members or community members who aren't numbers people, that's a quick number to be like, okay, we're doing good. You know, so that's what we have also that percent of budget. And I like that part of a report.
I've seen budgets done differently than this. This is a line item budget, and seen it the other way, and it's so confused. Like, where are we at in our budget? And working with the line item budget, it's so much better. So I was really happy when I was going through the course syllabus that like that's what we get to do. We get to do a line item budget because I think that really is important, and it also helps us be very transparent. Because I think with the superintendents I've worked with that had the other budget. That wasn't the line item budget and didn't have those percentages, there were some transparency issues of like, where's this money coming from? Like, how much money do we have left? Like constantly asking those questions. Where here, like, this is just part of your stuff to your board. And it really makes that transparency good so they can see where the money is going, where we're at in our budget, stuff like that. So when they're making decisions, they get to make better financial decisions because they know where you're actually at. So
Well,
That's,
we
I think,
talked so
the
much last
huge
time
thing.
about- Oh, sorry, Adam.
I was just gonna pick, I mean, I think the transparency and being able to track what you're spending, when you're spending better, you know. Why are we so high on supplies? Well, is it elementary supplies? Is it high school supplies? Is it building 5 of 9 supplies or whatever it is? I think you can better track and do your taxpayers the best service with that. So this is just another example of what was budgeted. The left-hand side is the unposted, so it's your estimated, and then the right side is your actual. And again, this is all just, the top ones are your revenues and the bottom ones your disbursements. But, you know, we break down substitutes, not just by district, but by building. And then we actually break it down by in-house sub versus out-of-house sub. But what you budget to what you actually spend, a good way to help you as you build your next budget. Again, another page out of that report, I highlighted, you know, supplies for us are by subject, not just in general of supplies, so that again, we can better track of where those things are going, who's using them, are we being equitable and fair with where we need everything, where we're putting our resources. And then here are just a couple other funds. Again, what you budget to what you're actually spending, just showing some more examples of where those codes are at and how you track your spending in that line item budget. And then just disbursements. Again, not every code will have an object. Local codes will be labeled different than the ND code is the same. I think a big thing too, talking to my bookkeeper, is make sure that you read the description of what those object codes are, where sometimes you think it's one, but it's really another one. So really dive into what that object is. And the local level, as we've talked about, just allows you to track the spending the way that you want to track it.
I think too with this stuff, like there's going to be things along the way that your business manager and you as a superintendent, they're going to be like, how do you code this? They both told me this, and then you're like, I don't know. And you call NDE, and she said there's even been times, she's like, the manual is your Bible, but there's been a lot of times where they're like, hey, we're going to get together with our team to see how we have to code this, and we'll get back to you. So like, it's like, this is not something that is super easy all the time. And so again, we talked about it last time, like that collaboration piece and not being afraid to ask questions when you need to ask questions is really important.
Do you guys want to share any examples of just how you guys locally code or break some things down that may be different, or anything more specific examples?
If you go to the next slides, it actually breaks down each of ours, and that might be a good place to start.
Perfect.
So I'm grateful you guys let me go first because this, like, kind of like Rachel said, this is totally out of my wheelhouse. So when I talked to our business manager, I just said, okay, I don't even know what I don't know sometimes. So I said, just make this super easy for me. So I was able to talk. Jamie Spatansky is our business manager or a bookkeeper. Those titles are kind of interchangeable. Dean Tickle is our superintendent here in Loop City. Mr. Tickle is actually out most of the week. He was sick, so I didn't get a chance to really pick his brain on everything. But Jamie and I did sit down a couple of times. The big things that she told me is that the software that we have, the Software Unlimited, will adapt to most of the code changes. So she said she does always print off those code books, but she said for the most part, it's pretty intuitive. It can help with that. One of the things that she said we're needing to change for the future is right now in our activity account, we have whatever the activity is. We use the example of basketball, and we have the revenue and expenses. And then further down, we're a little bit more detailed with that. She said we're going to need to change that and make that a little bit more granular so that we can keep track of that. So anything with gate dues, anything like that. Right now, it's more of a lump sum, and we want to get a little bit more detailed with that. I did ask specifically about the coding. This is another thing that she thought will probably need to change. We currently have high school, elementary, and district, which sounds pretty straightforward, except our elementary is split into 2 different buildings. My building is 1st through 5th grade, and then the other building is kindergarten, and we're adding a preschool. And so I'll get into this on the next slide also. But in that other building, we do have a co-op with the local preschool. It's called Little Sprouts. And so that brings some logistical things too when it comes to coding. So if you go to the next one, I think I put some more information. I guess a couple other things, just since we talked about it, I asked specifically about a couple of things. So maybe not so much for this presentation, but just to kind of continue that. She said instead of our QC Puff, we call it our Hazard or ADA Fund, which I thought was interesting that we just use a different title for that. And we do not have a contingency fund. I asked specifically about the cooperative fund since that was brought up last time. We are in a cooperative for sports athletics with Arcadia. We're Arcadia Loop City. So she said we do have separate accounts. And then when we run short, we will transfer it from the general fund. And then we do a 70-30 split with that. We used to be 50-50. Arcadia is quite a bit smaller than Loop City. And so we had to change that a little bit. We were 80-20. And now we're a little bit more equitable, at least on our side, with the 70-30 split. So looking at all those things I thought were really interesting. And then, like I said, we're adding the preschool, which will be Head Start. And so we did get some grants with that to add some more things with payroll and paras and things like that. But then we're also starting a daycare with our local community daycare, Little Sprouts. And so then that gets to be kind of a logistical thing when it comes to budgeting with our payroll, the taxes, the benefits. How do we divide all those? And so we're really working closely with them. Sorry, this is my recess is over alarm. All of those things, just making sure that we have that cooperative agreement in place ahead of time so that we're not running into things in the moment. And I think I have one more. She also just said she always has a cheat sheet for how she enters the money that we get because she wants to make sure she's doing it correctly. We obviously get the treasury money monthly, and this goes toward our general and special building fund. And then the big thing that she said, and I know we talked about this last week also, Loop City really doesn't do a lot of local coding. The superintendent is much more focused on light items and big picture things. And I know, Brayden, you said in Elm Creek, you guys don't even divide it by building. My superintendent's from Elm Creek. That was his last superintendent job. So I'm like, this kind of makes sense. But like you said, you kind of have to tailor to the district where you're at. But you can also see, I mean, there's some local flavor and then there's some superintendent influence. You gotta kind of find the balance between those. And then on the next slide, now it's super important that we go over it, but I just included her cheat sheets there. Because I thought, and again, a lot of this we talked about last time, but when it comes to any of that local coding, I thought she always uses that. That's kind of like you said, Adam, that's her Bible. She wants to make sure that she's getting everything with that.
And I would say Kippahaw County, as far as like local leveling, we do like the buildings, high school, elementary. A lot of times if it's a district item, it ends up in the high school side. And Linnea was showing me, like her chart of accounts, because kind of looking forward a little bit to next week and time. But just when I think I get it, she gives me something else. But she pulled out this chart of accounts that she was going to show me. And she's like, but I don't want to give you this because there's so much we don't use, because in our district, we would have one entry. And so, you know, it's, I think it's maybe a little bit different in a smaller district.
For sure.
So, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from Kearney, where it would be extremely important that you break it down by building. And now in smaller districts like Loop City or Kippaha, you have 1 or 2.5 buildings, and
Yep.
yeah, and we just have a lot more shared staff too, which I think is a big piece of it. Our PE program is a district program. We don't have an elementary and a high school. So if you're ordering PE equipment, how does that look? Sometimes it is truly just for elementary, sometimes it truly is just high school, and sometimes it's district.
And Rachel, I would agree. We do the same thing where if it's in the high school, but it's like a situation like Abby said with PE being K-12, it's just coded to the district from that. But specifically having that line item budget of breaking it down from elementary to high school, we found it as something here with our new superintendent where we were spending so much more on custodial supplies at the high school, but it's because our old custodian was using multiple vendors as opposed to one. So when we then funneled everything into one, it was like, oh my gosh, look at how much money we saved. Where if we wouldn't have had that line item of breaking it up by building, I don't think that we would have been able to find that. So that was a specific example. I think that was very helpful in that. And we're also using it right now of trying to justify of hiring a full-time sub that we can use because of the tracking of how often we need a sub and the amount of money that we're already spending on a sub, where could we save a little bit money or get more use out of a person if we had that. So it shows that data to help support some big decisions that you can make in your district.
Yeah, let me know how that goes for you guys, because I've thought about that for a long time, especially in a small district where everybody wears so many hats. If you could, yeah.
Well, I mean, on like any given week, you're going to have multiple people gone just for activities, let alone then you have somebody who is gone from there. So Abby, question for you, because I want to know, compare you guys to us. You have a couple elementary classes over at the high school building. So do you code those based off of the grade or what building that they're in?
We do great.
Perfect. And that's similar to what we do.
So yeah, I mean, it gets messy because we're one big building for 1st through 12th grade, but we kind of have the elementary wing, the middle school wing, and the high school wing. And so it gets, tricky to figure out how to do all that for sure.
That's the beauty of this whole system too. And like it is overwhelming a little bit and confusing, but you can really tailor it. It's not so, it doesn't tie your hands as a district so much. You can tailor it to meet the needs of what you need to do and how you spend money, and maybe how you can, like you said, how you can look at how you're spending money to find ways to save. So
Okay, so mine is next, and mine is going to be a lot different than all of yours, because we are a big school, and so we use the same exact codes as you guys do, but when it gets to like building to building, we definitely have to make sure that we have some kind of code that goes along with it, because I think we have 5 or 6 elementary schools. And then we have the middle school, we have the junior high, and then we have the high school, but we also have some of our like behavioral program stuff and SPED will go, and they have like these, I can't think of what they outsource us to like the Christ Lutheran and the elementary schools and those kind of things as well, because they don't have teachers there to do those kind of things. So that is definitely one of the big differences. Another one is that each school has a business manager, and that's what we call it. And then at the central office, we call our big wig bookkeeper the general ledger. That way, that's kind of the difference. So The senior high business manager is Melissa Hanson, and so she handles everything at the senior high. And then she gives like a quarterly and all of that stuff to the general ledger. One of the mistakes that we learned, especially this year, because our assistant superintendent, he was the one that was kind of working on the budget with the general ledger. We kind of found out that he was kind of mishapping funds. So unfortunately, like, I think the lesson is that even though, you know, the superintendent has so many other things that they have to focus on, and, you know, like the big picture, they also need to remember that they got to make sure that they're watching, you know, what everybody's doing. Because when we got audited, there were some really big holes in things. So, and the general ledger had absolutely no idea, because the assistant superintendent was supposed to be, you know, doing the right thing. So, that was kind of pretty much the only thing that's different. My links down at the bottom are just how we code things. There's also the general audit from 2022 to 2023. So you can kind of see those different things. And then the budget overview, so like how they actually did the budget in 2022, 23.
Did you want me to pull any of those up, Abby? Or Brittany, sorry.
I don't think you need to. It's pretty straightforward, just like yours, the pictures that you had. I just put it on there. The only thing that's different is there's more division of funds. So, and I am gonna have to apologize, but I'm gonna have to put myself on mute the rest of the time, because I am still in the danger zone. I am a teacher, so I'm gonna start having kids coming in and out of my room. So if I don't answer, that's why.
Brittany, I have a quick question for you. I'm curious that you have a building bookkeeper in each building. Is that usually the school secretary, or is that a completely separate position?
So I think the business manager at the senior high actually started as a part-time position when I first started here. And then they realized that they really needed them there all the time. And so then it was a full-time one. But we have so many funds coming in and out, especially with activities, that it was really important, especially for the middle school and the junior high, to have one as well, because so many credit cards had to go out for transportation and those kind of things, and funds for like travel and buses and all that stuff. And so that was kind of where we decided that it was a need for those things.
But each elementary has a person specific.
I am not quite sure on that.
Oh,
I
okay.
think
I
that
guess
there
that's
might
why I was thinking. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of folks.
see, and we have one that's out in Woodland Park, and that's actually Stanton County, which I don't even want to start touching that. So I'm guessing they probably have their own, because since they are in that weird county, and you could definitely go and search like the Norfolk area to see where all the different county lines are, because so Stanton is in Woodland Park, and then right outside of town, Wayne County. So we have like Norfolk is like on the very, very cusp of like 5 different counties. And so, but I think all the in-town ones have just like one separate one. I think I think they have like a part-time person that's like the secretary and the business manager, that kind of, they all put stuff together and then it goes to the general ledger.
And I was thinking when I was in Kearney, which is similar-ish size to Norfolk, I was thinking our secretary did most of the bookkeeping for the elementary. But then I know, yeah, middle schools and high schools, they obviously have a lot more going on.
And I think that's the case here too, because I mean, the only travel that they really have is, you know, like if they're taking a, you know, trip to some place, or they're having someone bust in and those kind of things. So I think it's pretty usual and easy coding.
I'll go next. For Elm Creek, our business manager does all the coding. The superintendents just kind of talk her through it. Like I said, the function codes, and the accounts are where they're really concerned about for the creation of the budget. And she said the manuals are Bible. Both of my mentors say they just really advise, the business manager when she has questions, that she's really good at it. Like she was the business manager when Tickle was here. So she's been doing it. She's been doing it for a little bit.
Poor lady.
Yeah. And then they, like I said, they use the coding for line item budget to track their expenses and different things like that. They're not super up to date on it, like on the changes and the nuances. Really, the ones they're really up to date on are the ones that are going to affect their budget when they're in their budget creation and following the budget. So they do have some input into, and everybody kind of has a different idea. They have some input into like how we're going to code certain things like big expenses. And so and like I said, everybody does it different and they have their own way of doing it. So it is interesting. They both have, one of them is he wants to get down to the brass taxes on everything. Like he really wants it coded specifically. And the other, that's been doing it a lot longer and he's here as an interim. He doesn't need it coded that much because he's like, as long as it goes in the correct fund and we're tracking it, if we need to track expenses, we'll get more specific, but if we feel like we're in a good place, we don't have to do that. So we use software unlimited. We talked about a lot of this stuff. Receipts don't need object codes. We do, and I'm not sure if this is everywhere, but she did say something that kind of caught my attention. The disbursements are split. When we do them here, we split them between technology and non-technology all the time. That might be a everyone thing. I'm not really sure on that.
We do the same thing.
Do you?
Okay, so it must
I'm
be.
curious because that's something we talk about next week. And I had actually made a note when I was going through the Bible. I'm like, there's something here. So I'll be curious. Yeah. To see what.
And then
my
she
notes
also
say
said
about
something
that.
that we really need to know is that disbursements that are under $5,000 have to be coded as supplies. And if it's above $5,000 for equipment, it's coded as equipment. So the example she used, if you buy 3 refrigerators for the kitchen and it's $6,500, it would have to be coded as supplies because it's not, each one has to be over $6,000. So that was kind of interesting. And we talked about local leveling coding is extremely beneficial to track expenses and budget progress monitoring, just like Adam's example of, hey, we need to figure out why we're spending so much on custodial supplies. And if you weren't doing some local level stuff, you probably wouldn't even know that was an issue. So that's why that stuff is important. Then Tom said, it was really interesting. He said, one of the things that that is hard when you're new is ensuring when you're doing grants, like ESSER, Title I, all that different things, that your codes, you're coding it the correct way, because if not, it's going to delay your payment. And he says the extra work you have to do to provide documentation is no fun and takes a lot of time. So he's like, make sure you're on the same page with your business manager and you are putting it. He's like, usually I'm the one that screws it up, not the business manager, because they're the expert in this. So he said that. And again, this, like everything else in education, is a moving target. Changed 4 or 5 years ago. Tom said people really struggled with it when it changed over. So I'm sure we'll see this change in our lifetime. And then call NDE to help. And one of the things that we do just to help, and I have it right here, I don't know if you can see it, to help with our coding, and we switched to this. Again, Dr. Schroeder was a lot more getting it down to individual things and stuff like that. But we made a switch with all of our credit cards to one card, MasterCards. And so we have these for every single thing. So like, this is the activity director card. I have one for volleyball. I have one for every activity. We have it for high school. And so when we get those bills, they break those out for us. And so when our business manager is coding it and our superintendent is looking at what we had for expenses, like it's already separated into those things. So I thought that was one thing I'd share that we do, because she mentioned it and he mentioned it, that really helps them track expenses, because like we're not going to go put it on the activity director's card when we're getting hotel rooms for Stay Cheer, or we're ordering teacher supplies. So that stuff helps. Like, and like I said, they just said, like, be willing to learn and adapt, because these things are going to change.
That's interesting, because we do that currently, and our bookkeeper really wants to go down to like 3 or 4 credit cards where it's like one as a district admin, one as a transportation one, where like you check it out just for fuel, and then one for supply. So we have it that way right now. So it's interesting that you guys like that. Ours is kind of, because the reason she doesn't like it is because every month it is over 30 bills for 30 different credit cards, where she'd rather just have one bill and then go do it. But as you're explaining it and how I see it, I mean, I totally makes sense that way. But it's just, again, that local, who's comfortable with what, that's what's the unique part about it.
Yeah, it makes it super nice for me too, because I code all the activity bills and stuff like that. Not with a number, but I say, hey, this is the account, and I can go in and I can check just my experience in budgeting. I can go and check my budget for each of those sports and say, okay, I have all these, oh, I missed this one. Like, what, I don't have a receipt for this one. Like, what went on with this? So really, for me, it really helped. But I haven't seen the other side of it. That's that local thing, that whatever works best for you.
So when I talked to my mentors, I mean, it was that district users manual, and she has 2 screens, and when she's coding, that district users manual is right there. My other mentor had that district master code list. If you want to click on the district users manual, there were just some things that for me as a newbie were really,
This one over here, right?
yep. I just thought, okay, I like this because it can give, go to, I think, page 12 or 13. Oh, maybe, yep, right here. Like for somebody who's totally new to all this, this was super handy. And I think maybe go back up to page 12. Like it, for me, and they're sharing this, for me as a newbie, this was really explaining those codes. And then the more I got into conversations with them, they're dealing with a lot more numbers as you look at local level funding. But for me, that was a pretty nice resource. We can go back to the slides. And like I said, that's all kind of right there for you. They talked about, listen, sometimes we don't have things coded. Talk to the superintendent or NDE. She said, I've called NDE, or she also has called like local bookkeepers. Maybe that's on the other slide. I haven't looked at this since I did this Wednesday. Maybe go to that next slide, Adam. Yeah. Yep, there it is. She also uses other local bookkeepers when she has a question, because they're all also using that software unlimited. One of her pieces of advice was to check that user's manual more than annually, because sometimes there's changes in there. And her other suggestion was to submit the AFR early, because it'll kick out codes that are incorrect, and then you can go in and fix that. Couple other things. When I talked to Dr. Isom, she had mentioned, just like you had said, Brandon, when you're talking about federal funds, take the time to really make sure you code those correctly, because it makes getting your money a whole lot easier.
I think also make sure you follow all the rules with it.
Yeah.
ESSER funds, you have to follow Davis-Bacon, which there's a lot of logistics behind that, but you could potentially get yourself in trouble with all of that. So, I mean, and that's with anything. That's with REAP and all revision, any grants, anything where you're getting federal money. I think that's just like we talked about the first video of have 2 eyes on your budget. I think anything with grants, ESSERs, federal money, make sure you have 2 or 3 sets of eyes on it to make sure you're dotting all the I's and crossing the T's.
Mm-hmm.
And ask questions.
Yep. And she also, she really appreciates the auditors when they come in, because they're like, oh, And it's so quick and easy for them. And then it's oh, well, we can fix that. We get that in the right spot and away we can go. So she appreciates the auditors when they come in. Talked about that changing things mid-year. Using resources. Yeah, a lot of stuff is exactly what we've already talked about. Just that we don't use classroom codes and things like that because we're a small district, but. So I have nothing more to add.
So what I did was I just put kind of the three big conclusions of things from looking at, I'm an English teacher, so that's kind of what I have to do is like, what are the three things that you kind of come from this? And also, I apologize that my children had to come and wave at all of you.
We love seeing it.
They're my super friendly class, so.
Tell them
Um,
hi.
But so my first thing was within the schools, so in Nebraska, because I know we're all in Nebraska, there is a lot of coding that is similar. So, and that's kind of something that we all addressed. And then the conclusion too is bigger schools have more funds for their budgets and special codes for buildings. And then the last one is making the code book and, any helpful websites. So like NDE and those kind of things, your friend. Because there are so many codes, you're never going to remember them and you're never going to memorize them.
I think maybe the other thing, it's all buildings district specific. What looks like in Kippahaw may not look like what it's even in Loop City, even though we're both small, there's different things we do.
Do what works for your district and helping you maintain a healthy budget and a healthy school system.
Yeah.
I agree. Whatever you can do to ensure that you're being fiscally responsible for your taxpayers, there's no right or wrong answer. You have to do what works for you and your bookkeeper.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to end the recording. Are we good with that? Or do we have other things?
I think that's it.
Good to go. Thanks, team.
The only thing I was going to add is that I did put links,
Okay.
helpful links at the end. So whenever whoever posts it, so like the audit page, and all those different things.
Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you. I'll just put this on recording. I'll make it sure it's public so that you can see it, Dr. C. And hopefully we have the settings so that you can see us as well. And I guess we can make plans about next week in email,
Sure.
or we can.
Yeah.
All right. Have a happy weekend, everybody.
Okay. Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yep. See ya.